It's March 18th, 1925, a Wednesday afternoon. Kids are in school. Farmers are working their fields. Families are going about their day in small towns across Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. In 3.5 hours, 695 of them will be dead. The tri-state tornado didn't just touch down and lift back up like most tornadoes. It stayed on the ground for 219 miles, longer than the distance from New York City to Washington, D.C. It traveled at 73 miles per hour, faster than most cars of the era could drive, and it carved a path of destruction so complete that entire towns simply ceased to exist. This is the story of the deadliest tornado in American history, and why, a century later, it still holds that terrible record. The day started with unusual weather, but nothing that screamed catastrophe. March in the Midwest is always unpredictable. Cold fronts collide with warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico, creating the perfect conditions for severe storms. But March 18th, 1925 wasn't just severe, it was apocalyptic. A massive low-pressure system had stalled over the Great Plains. Warm, humid air was surging north, while cold, dry air pushed down from Canada. The atmosphere was unstable, primed, and waiting for a trigger. At 1 p.m., that trigger pulled. Near Ellington, Missouri, a funnel cloud dropped from the sky. But this wasn't a typical tornado. Witnesses described it as a massive churning wall of darkness, nearly a mile wide in some places. It didn't look like the narrow funnels people were used to seeing. It looked like the sky itself was falling. And then it started moving. Fast. The tornado tore through the Missouri town of Annapolis first. In minutes, 90% of the town was destroyed. Homes were ripped from their foundations. The town school collapsed with children inside. 4 people died in Annapolis, but that was just the beginning. The storm didn't stop. It didn't slow down. It kept moving northeast at a terrifying speed, crossing into southern Illinois. At 2:26 p.m., it hit the town of Gorham, Illinois. Gorham had about 500 residents. The tornado killed 34 of them in less than 3 minutes. Survivors said there was no warning, no time to run. One moment, the day was normal. The next, the entire town was gone. Houses, schools, churches, reduced to splinters and rubble. One survivor, a young boy named Russell Finch, later recalled being picked up by the wind and thrown into a field. When he woke up, his house had vanished. His mother was dead. His sister was found a quarter mile away, barely alive, but the tornado wasn't done. At 2:30 p.m., it reached Murfreesboro, Illinois, the largest town in its path. Murfreesboro had a population of about 11,000 people. It was a bustling railroad town with brick buildings, schools, and a thriving downtown. The tornado hit during the middle of the afternoon when the streets were full. In 4 minutes, the tornado killed 234 people in Murfreesboro alone. It destroyed over 1,200 homes. The business district was obliterated. Longfellow School, a 3-story brick building, collapsed with dozens of children inside. 17 of them died. Survivors described a sound like 1,000 freight trains. The air turned black with debris. Entire families were buried under the rubble of their homes. The injured overwhelmed the town's small hospital. There weren't enough doctors. There weren't enough coffins. One witness, a man named W.D. Waldo, said, "It looked like the hand of God reached down and wiped the town off the map." But the tornado still wasn't finished. At 2:34 p.m., just minutes after leaving Murfreesboro, it struck the town of DeSoto, Illinois. DeSoto had about 600 residents. The tornado killed 69 of them, more than 10% of the entire town. The local school took a direct hit. 33 children died inside, making it one of the deadliest school disasters in American history. Parents who rushed to the school found nothing but twisted metal and shattered bricks. Some children were found miles away, carried by the wind. Others were never found at all. And still, the tornado kept moving. At 3 p.m., it crossed the Wabash River into Indiana. The town of Griffin, Indiana, was next. The tornado destroyed 85% of the town and killed 25 people. Then it hit the town of Owensville, then Princeton. Entire farms were scraped clean. Barns, silos, livestock, gone. By the time the tornado finally lifted near Petersburg, Indiana, at 4:30 p.m., it had been on the ground for 3.5 hours. It had traveled 219 miles. It had destroyed 15,000 homes, and it had killed 695 people. To put that in perspective, no tornado since has killed more than 200 people. The tri-state tornado killed nearly 700. So why was it so deadly? There are a few reasons, and they all came together in the worst possible way. First, the speed. The tornado moved at 73 miles per hour, which meant towns had almost no time to react. By the time people realized what was happening, it was too late to run. Second, the size. This wasn't a narrow funnel. At its widest, the tornado was over a mile across. There was nowhere to hide from it. Third, the path. The tornado stayed on the ground for over 200 miles without lifting. Most tornadoes touch down, cause damage, and lift back up within minutes. This one just kept going. Fourth, and maybe most important, there was no warning system. In 1925, the word tornado was barely used. Weather forecasting was primitive. There were no radar systems, no sirens, no emergency broadcasts. People had no idea it was coming until they saw it. And by then, it was too late. The aftermath was catastrophic. Entire towns had to be rebuilt from scratch. Thousands of people were left homeless in the middle of March, with freezing temperatures and no shelter. Relief efforts were overwhelmed. The Red Cross set up emergency camps, but supplies ran out quickly. Mass graves were dug because there wasn't time to bury people individually. In some towns, the death toll was so high that bodies were laid out in rows on the street, waiting to be identified. The tri-state tornado also exposed how unprepared America was for natural disasters. There was no federal disaster relief system, no FEMA, no coordinated emergency response. Towns were left to fend for themselves, but the disaster did lead to change. In the years that followed, meteorologists began studying tornadoes more seriously. The U.S. Weather Bureau started issuing severe weather warnings. Schools and towns developed tornado safety protocols. The tri-state tornado became a case study in how deadly nature can be when we're unprepared. Even today, nearly 100 years later, the tri-state tornado remains the deadliest in American history. No tornado since has come close to its death toll. Modern tornado warning systems have saved countless lives. Radar technology, weather satellites, and emergency alert systems give people time to take shelter. Building codes have improved. We understand tornadoes better than we ever have. But every spring, when the conditions are right, the same atmospheric ingredients that created the tri-state tornado come together again over the Great Plains. Warm, moist air, cold, dry air, an unstable atmosphere. and meteorologists hold their breath. Because the truth is, a tornado like the tri-state could happen again. The weather hasn't changed. The atmosphere doesn't care about our technology. The only difference now is that we have a warning. We have time to run. In 1925, they didn't. The tri-state tornado wasn't just a weather event. It was a catastrophe that reshaped how America thinks about severe weather, disaster preparedness, and the terrifying power of nature. 695 people gone in 3.5 hours, 15,000 homes destroyed, entire towns erased from the map. It's a reminder that when nature decides to show its fury, all we can do is watch, prepare, and hope we're not in the way.